I'm Dwight Drummond. Tonight, a man is dead after being shot by police. The suspect spotted near a Scarborough school, reportedly carrying a rifle.
Due to the proximity to a school, I certainly understand the trauma and how traumatic this must have been.
I praise the cops for doing what they did.
It happened near Lawrence and Port Union Road. We'll have the latest from the scene. Plus,
approximately an hour later, tactical teams arrive. They make entry, shoot and kill the suspect.
questions tonight about the police response to the mass shooting rampage at a Texas elementary school. And
vote Liberal come June 2nd.
The way to get the change you want is to make sure that you vote NDP.
Greens have huge momentum.
Ontario's main political leaders are gearing up for the final push as the election campaign enters the home stretch. A man was shot and killed by police this afternoon. It happened just steps away from a Scarborough school. Police responding to the area just before 1 this afternoon for reports of a man carrying a rifle. Chris Glover is live at the scene near Port Union and Lawrence for us now. And Chris, some really anxious moments there for students and parents.
Oh, absolutely, especially given that mass shooting at that elementary school in Texas just this week. Many parents telling me that they heard about these reports of a man with a rifle. They heard that schools were in lockdown, and they raced to the scene, panicked, but grateful to hear ultimately that no one else was injured. The afternoon quiet was shattered in this Scarborough neighborhood when around 1 p.m. police got reports of a man walking in the street with a rifle. Officers raced to respond.
I heard 3 rapid shots in succession, and parking my car and looking back, I saw the police attempting to resuscitate somebody, and thereafter an orange blanket going over that person. Literally, I'm still in shock.
A police officer shot and killed the man, and the Special Investigations Unit is now probing the circumstances.
There is no threat to the public, as this is believed to be an isolated incident.
The ordeal was steps away from an elementary school, and several nearby schools went into lockdown. Police say no one was injured beyond the man police shot. Parents especially triggered after the mass shooting this week at a Texas elementary school, killing 19 kids there.
Hey, I praise the cops for doing what they did, They stop another massacre from another school getting shot.
Toronto police wouldn't speculate as to where the man was headed and gave no indication he was headed to the school.
Well, let's not speculate as to what's occurred here today and what was happening. And so in the fullness of time, we will investigate every aspect of this, and we'll have a better understanding of what has occurred.
As the nearby schools lifted their lockdowns, frantic parents rushed to get their kids.
I got here in like 15 minutes, just worried, but luckily the kids are okay. I have another son at the daycare up the street as well, so it's a little nerve-wracking.
This dad says he's still shaking, but grateful that at least for now, Canada's gun violence isn't as bad as in the States.
It's just tragic what's going on in the States right now, and luckily we're quite different than over there. We don't have that problem to that scale, and hopefully we never will.
Once parents got to their kids, the stories of how nerve-wracking it was inside the school started pouring out.
It was really scary, so we all went under our desks, and we all were just kind of freaking out.
Adia Dua said her class was locked down for an hour, and at first she thought it was just a drill.
My heart was beating really fast.
I was just sitting there. He really wanted to hold my hand, so I was holding his hand, and then there was someone shaking on the door, and I was terrified.
Grade 3 student Grayson Ryder said he helped comfort his friend and gave another his hiding place while in lockdown.
We learned how to be safe.
When it's right in front of their school, it's hard to process.
His mom, Megan, said the hardest part was not being with her son.
Do you go to the school? Do you wait? Do you see what's going on? Has he been caught? And yeah, so that's what it was kind of going. My stomach was flipping a little bit. Almost started to cry.
Another mom that I spoke to here on the scene raced to come here because her 3 children and her husband, all of them were inside the school. She said that tonight they will be having some very difficult conversations, Dwight, as I'm sure so many families in this neighborhood and across the city will certainly as well. And we just got an update here at the scene from the Special Investigations Unit. They say that 2 Toronto police officers discharged their weapons at this man. The man was then pronounced dead here on the scene, and the SIU would not confirm if he was holding a rifle at the time he was shot, but they did say that a firearm was discovered here on the scene. Dwight?
Thank you for that, Chris. Now, videos have emerged from Tuesday's school shooting in Texas. It shows parents begging police to storm the building, but today police said tactical units were needed for an assault and the rescue operation was immediate. Matt Nagaba-Selassie has the latest.
Frustration and anger. Parents seen in this video outside the school wondering why the police officers they see are not going inside where the shooter is. Just a warning, this video may be hard to watch. Jacqueline Cazares' father said he tried to go in.
I mean, I wasn't rushing in, but, I was willing. I even asked the cops, like, y'all need help. Like, I would still carry her myself. That time I didn't have my piece, but we were willing to go to rush in. There was a couple guys who were like, we're just so angry that, of course, any father would want to, but.
Did the police keep you away?
I mean, they didn't physically push us away, but, they just kept on pushing us back, just slowly, and then more got there, and they're like, you need to let us do our job.
Now he and so many others are mourning the loss of their children and demanding answers from the authorities on why it took so long to stop the attack.
There's a lot going on, a lot complex situation. They're measuring. Approximately an hour later, U.S. Border Patrol tactical teams arrive. They make entry, shoot and kill the suspect.
Everyone here is struggling to make sense of any of this, including Fernando Rodriguez. The 9-year-old was in the school when the shooting started.
I hear a lot of gunshots in front of my class.
What did your teacher tell you at that time?
To hide and be quiet and be quiet before they don't get us.
How long were you hiding in there?
I don't know.
Do you remember looking around at your classmates, seeing anything? What do you remember?
I just remember hearing the gunshots, the shooters shooting everywhere.
So today he returned to the school to lay flowers and remember his classmates and the teachers who never got a chance to make it out. Magda Gebre-Selassie, CBC News, Uvalde, Texas.
Another rash of carjackings attempted overnight, this time in both Toronto and Durham region. Toronto police are investigating 4 similar incidents that happened overnight in the same northeast Scarborough neighborhood, all occurring over a span of 2 hours. Police believe the incidents are related. In each case, a suspect armed with a gun approached the victim in a driveway. Detectives say 2 cars were stolen. This comes as Toronto police put in place a special investigative team to tackle the carjackings.
A lot of these high-end vehicles are immediately put in shipping containers and they are sent overseas. It is a very high profitable industry in the underworld with these types of property crimes.
Also last night, Durham police say a man was pistol whipped in an attempted carjacking in Pickering, while in the Shepherd and Whites Road area, a woman in her car, a man approached and knocked on the window. He was armed. He told her to roll it down. She refused and drove off. It is 1 week out from the Ontario election campaign. The Liberals announced they have lost a candidate, defended another, and blamed the NDP for attacks against female candidates. That's as both those parties started out their day attacking Doug Ford and the PCs. Lorena Redekop has more.
Stephen Del Duca was supposed to be talking about the Liberal plan to tax the wealthy, to differentiate his party from the PCs and Doug Ford. But he had a surprise announcement.
The Ontario Liberal candidate, Audrey Festeriga, has now withdrawn her candidacy in Chatham-Kent-Leamington.
She was a late replacement for a candidate the party dropped due to homophobic slurs online when he was a teenager. The NDP had raised questions about signatures on Festeriga's nomination papers, whether people actually signed for the previous candidate. The party filed a complaint with Elections Ontario. Del Duca says Festeriga felt harassed and blamed Andrea Horwath and the NDP.
Attacking a woman every single day questioning her integrity, questioning her reputation, trying to do everything they can in the most despicable way imaginable is, again, appalling and unconscionable.
However, he didn't deny the allegations. Yesterday, a former NDP politician called for Festeriga to withdraw.
Deeply discouraging, because I believe it actually will discourage potential female candidates going forward as an example of how they're not properly supported.
This afternoon, Horvath responded, flanked by two of her female candidates, and attacked Del Duca.
Blaming me, blaming others, making accusations against me is not the way that you take responsibility for your behaviors and your actions.
Del Duca was also asked about his London North Centre candidate. This week, she tweeted out a poll with no details, suggesting she was in the lead. It was criticized as deliberately misleading people, referred to as push polling, aimed at swaying voters, called out, including by the NDP.
A disturbing pattern and a discouraging pattern, disappointing pattern, I should say, when you think about, here we go again. Here's Andrea Horvath and the Ontario NDP attacking a female candidate, a female Liberal candidate.
Push polling is repugnant and shouldn't be happening. Whether that's being done by a woman candidate or not a woman candidate, it shouldn't be happening. We know that it's been banned in other orders of government.
In the end, it's left two parties vying to be seen as the progressive option, now attacking each other, while Doug Ford, who limits his questions from media, escapes any further attacks. Polls have consistently put his PC party in the lead. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
To tell us what the polls are saying with 1 week left in the Ontario election campaign, we are joined by Eric Grenier. He is a poll analyst, a writer at the website The Writ, and he's CBC's poll tracker for this provincial election. Eric, where do the parties stand at this point, sir, in the campaign?
Pretty much where they've stood for the entire campaign. We have the PCs in our poll tracker, which is an aggregation of all the polls that are being published during the campaign, at 36%. So they're ahead of the Liberals, who are at 27%, and the New Democrats are at 24%, the Greens at 7%. So there is right now about a 9-point gap between the PCs and the Liberals. We haven't really seen much change in that since the beginning of the campaign. And back in 2018, PCs beat the NDP in the province-wide vote by about 7 points and won a majority government. So a 9-point lead probably puts them in a position for another majority government if the election were held today.
All right, poll tracker says that on the road to majority, but the poll tracker still says there's a chance that the party could fall short. What factors then, Eric, could influence their chances of getting that second majority government?
Well, of course, there's the possibility that between now and Election Day, the numbers will come down for the PCs and they'll drop below majority territory. 36% is not a very high number to get a majority government. So the PCs are really banking on some vote efficiency to make sure that the amount of votes that they do get are distributed in the right places across the province to get them across the 63-seat threshold. But of course, there's also the possibility that on Election Day, the polls will be overestimating PC support and they could just fall short. But all the signs are pointing towards a PC majority. There is the outside chance of a minority government with these kinds of numbers, but we'd probably need to see a much smaller gap between the PCs and the Liberals.
What about the race then for second place? How close are the Liberals and the NDP at this point?
Well, in the popular vote, it's pretty close, about 3 points, 4 points, depending on the poll. And we do see that the Liberals are always in second. That has been pretty consistent throughout the campaign, that it's the Liberals second and the NDP third. But because of how the support breaks down across the province, the NDP could probably still emerge as the official opposition, because where they do have support, it's concentrated. So in Hamilton, in parts of Toronto, in Northern Ontario, in parts of the Southwest. So the NDP is able to turn fewer votes into more seats than the Liberals, who have much more widely distributed support. So they're in a good position to finish second in a lot of ridings, but could come up short in quite a number and still end up as the third party in the legislature.
We remember the Liberal decimation the last time out, only had 7 seats after 2018. Is it surprising to see them rebound like this? Because this is a bit of a rebound for them.
Yeah, they could at least triple their seat count from the last time. But the Liberal brand is a pretty strong brand. If you think about what happened to the federal Liberals back in 2011, they had only 34 seats. It was the worst result in the party's history. And 4 years later, Justin Trudeau led them to a majority government. So you can see these kinds of shifts, particularly for a party that's well established, has a long history. And in a place like Ontario, where people are used to voting Liberal, they vote Liberal federally, they've often voted Liberal provincially, it's natural to maybe go back to where they were before. But 2018 was a bit of an anomalous election. Liberals had been in power for 15 years. Kathleen Wynne was pretty unpopular. So I think a lot of people might be returning to some of their old patterns of voting. And if the Liberals do end up winning 20 plus seats, it might not be government, but it's certainly a lot better than last time.
Yeah, last time out was definitely a change election. We are nearing the end. Do you expect to see any changes in public opinion then, Eric, over the next week? Because we are now exactly 1 week out.
Yeah, well, we haven't seen any shifts for the last 3 weeks, and there's not much of an indication that something is going to happen. We're not seeing numbers for desire for change, for example, go very high. It's still much lower than it was back in 2018. The leadership numbers haven't changed much. People more or less see Doug Ford, Andrew Horwath, and Stephen Del Duca as they did at the beginning of the campaign. So there's not a lot of signs that something is going to shift over the last few days of this campaign. Now, it's certainly possible. A lot of votes have already been cast in the advance ballot, but we'll have to wait and see. Some sort of major news event would have to happen, I would think, over the next few days to really radically change this campaign, because nothing's really moved the dial over the last 3 weeks. Is anything going to move the dial over the last week? Well, it hasn't so far, so we could expect that it won't in the next few days, but we'll see.
Yeah, and you'll be paying attention. Eric Grenier is a poll analyst, a writer at the website The Writ, and he will be running CBC's poll tracker for this election. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Didn't see that much sun out there today, Colette, but it was still hot and sticky.
Yeah, hot and sticky. And that's when we start to talk about, yes, we know the humidex, but also the dew point. So kind of the moisture content of the air is one way to look at it. As those come up, then we start to experience things differently in terms of how comfortable it is and how things feel. So you see where it starts to get climbing into the teens, and especially as you get into the 20s, it becomes uncomfortable. So these are not our temperatures. These are a look at our dew points currently. And we've got the ratings here. Okay, Oshawa's at 16, but otherwise 17 and 18. Do you remember where that falls on? I'll take you back in case you didn't see that. So right here, between it being humid and being a little bit muggy, nowhere near oppressive. We'll wait for that. That will come in time. But it does start to feel a bit more uncomfortable. The current temperatures, wow, they're here. So we're into the mid and even approaching the upper 20s. We got to 27 today for Pearson. The humidex values into those low 30s. Another way to tell things are uncomfortable. We're seeing a lot of the activity with the wet weather going around us. An isolated shower not out of the question here in the next few hours, but just wait, because overnight tonight, this is a very broad and complex system. We are going to have some waves going through of rainfall, Dwight, and at times heavier with some embedded thunderstorms. I'll kind of walk you through the timing on this and when it will end coming up.
No washing the car. Thank you, Colette.
No, you don't need to.
Tourists are once again trickling back into Toronto and the GTA. The industry took a hit during the pandemic, but as Natalie Collado reports, while with loosening restrictions and the return of festivals, tourism is beginning to show signs of a recovery.
As pandemic panic thaws, Toronto's tourism sector is once again starting to bloom. For the first time in nearly 2.5 years, hotels are reporting reaching 70% capacity, and events and festivals are once again drawing in travelers.
People are like, well, thank God there's something for us to do. We've been locked up for so long, and this is like a fun, neat spin on a food festival.
Hundreds are expected to attend this weekend's Spring into Spice Festival, Canada's first ever ethnic food and wine festival.
What we're doing here is we've got representation from India, the Caribbean, Latin America, and we're going to show how you can have these foods and have multiple varieties with them, multiple grapes with them.
Pre-pandemic tourism was a $10 billion a year business in Toronto. Officials say the industry is showing some signs of recovery.
We rely in equal parts on leisure and business travel. And so far, most of the recovery we've seen is leisure oriented. So until we start to get that balance back and we see the recovery of business travel as well alongside leisure, Toronto's not all the way back.
And that will take time. Weir says they are now booking conventions for next year, 2024, 2025, and 26.
Companies have to be comfortable again sending their people on the road again. And meeting planners have to be confident that when they host a meeting, people will come. So customer confidence is a big factor in that.
And so is competition.
We know that the recovery will be uneven.
There's big challenges that remains, like labor shortage, and supply chain issues. And the competition for visitor is fiercer than ever.
There's limited availability. And when I say that, I mean it in every sense I can.
Travel agent Charlene Dudley says her phone is ringing off the hook.
Now they're ready to go on that great big family trip, and they don't know when they can go. So they're calling and they're trying to find out what's the availability, how much will it cost, how soon can I get out of here, and what do I need?
Eager, say officials, to travel while they can.
People are going on the road, and they're going to spend more than they have ever spent before because they don't know if they're going to have to stay next year in their basements again.
Natalie Collada, CBC News, Toronto.
The governing body for soccer in Canada is cancelling a controversial exhibition game against Iran that was supposed to take place on June 5th in Vancouver. Now, Canada Soccer says it was trying to give its men's team important experience and will review its process for hosting international matches. Ashley Burke has more.
This move to cancel the game comes amid mounting public and political pressure. The Prime Minister said it was a bad idea. The Conservatives called it unacceptable. Vancouver's mayor condemned it, and the families who lost loved ones in flight PS752 have been the most outspoken. They say that they're happy this game is called off and that it should have never been booked in the first place. The families and experts say that sports and politics in Iran are intertwined and that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has ties to the team. That's the same branch of the military that shot down Flight 752. 138 people with ties to Canada died. Adding to the controversy, the head of Iran's soccer team said Canada Soccer planned to pay Iran's Football Federation $400,000 for the match, making it the first time in more than 2 decades that the team would have earned a profit from a friendly match. Ukraine is now calling on the soccer organization to arrange a match with its national team. It says the money could be used to fundraise for its humanitarian efforts. Ashley Burke, CBC News.
Ukrainian officials say their forces in eastern Luhansk are in danger of being surrounded and are retreating to fortified positions. The Luhansk fighting centers on 2 twin cities, and analysts suggest it could be a turning point in the battle for the Donbass and the war itself. Salima Shivji reports.
The fighting is intense in the Donbass, an extremely difficult and tense situation, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says, as a full force of Russian troops descends on the region. Russia intent on seizing entire control of the Donbass. And Ukraine's military admits that Russia does have the advantage in Luhansk. Its troops outnumber Ukrainian forces in some places in the east. Severodonetsk is key. It is very strategic. It is a mining and industrial town, and it is in the sights of Russian troops. It is the easternmost city in Luhansk that is still in Ukrainian hands. So it's now been surrounded on all 3 sides, and the shelling is intense, relentless, 24 hours a day, say local authorities, with Russian soldiers really trying to choke off supply lines into that city.
I'm afraid that no one in the world has a clear picture of what is happening there. Some villages and towns, they do not exist anymore. They were all turned into rubbles by Russian artillery fire, by Russian multiple launch rockets.
What his country needs desperately, he says, are multiple launch rocket systems to counter Russian troops in the Donbass. What they don't need, he says, is advice from the West that they should concede some of their land to Russia.
This whole line about Ukraine who has to make a concession to stop the war failed. It had failed in between the 2014 and 2022. Because the policy was always, okay, we have to convince Ukraine to be constructive, to engage Russia, to make a concession, to engage Russia, and it never worked.
And Ukraine is also skeptical of an offer from Russia with strings attached to end the blockade on grain moving through the Black Sea. More than 22 million tons of grain are stuck in Ukraine because of the war, and many are warning that that could lead to a severe global food crisis and to famine in many countries depending on those food supplies. Russia says if some of the punishing sanctions against its country are eased somewhat, it could open a humanitarian corridor to get that grain moving. Ukraine calls that blackmail. Salima Shivji, CBC News, London.
G7 energy and environment ministers began meetings today in Berlin. They are aiming to address the current energy crisis while maintaining commitments on greenhouse gas emissions. The Ukraine war has sparked a surge for non-Russian fossil fuels, and that could threaten climate targets. The ministers will be working to reaffirm a 1.5-degree global warming cap. A draft communique proposes phasing out coal by 2030, but it's believed that will face opposition from the U.S. and Japan. Two Scarborough candidates running in the upcoming provincial elections say hundreds of their campaign signs have been damaged or gone missing. Greg Ross has the details.
NDP candidate in Scarborough Centre, Nathan Shan, says someone is taking his campaign signs.
Over the last about a week and a half time period that we have had, about 500 signs go missing.
He says it's been a huge distraction for his campaign team, who have now been forced to spend a great deal of time replacing the signs.
We have seen the signs go missing, and we have gone back and put new signs, and then on a different day we will see it missing from another part of the neighborhood. So it's been really difficult for us to keep up with the missing signs.
Shan is not the only Scarborough candidate to claim to have had issues with campaign signs. A Liberal candidate says her signs have been vandalized.
We had a vandalizing of 16 of my large signs here on Ellesmere Road.
Mitzi Hunter is running in Scarborough-Guildwood. She says this goes far beyond just vandalism.
With, just really horrific racist language. They were spray painted all over my signs. We put up a few more signs to replace the ones that were damaged. And the next day we came back and those signs were actually sliced in half.
Hunter says she doesn't believe the majority of people in Scarborough would approve of vandalizing and stealing signs regardless of the party they support.
It is not reflective of our community in Scarborough.
Both candidates say that they have reported these issues to police.
I think it's important to hold people who do undemocratic things and criminal offenses accountable.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Housing affordability is a top issue during this election campaign, but some say parties also need to focus on issues when it comes to renting because many can't afford home ownership. Kelly Yoon with more on why rental rights in the GTA matter in this election.
This is just the front area here. We have one bedroom here.
Annie Stanley shares this apartment with her roommate. It has 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and costs $2,300 a month plus hydro.
Nobody thinks about people that are renting full time. And there's so many things people are doing to address, yes, buying a house, and it's really good that that's there, but there's this entire section of people that are just being left out.
Annie has been renting in Toronto for 8 years and knows she can't afford a home. Her place is rent controlled because it was built before 2018, but she still worries.
What if they decide to fix something and make it too nice, and then we get the above guideline rent increase?
The high cost of rent is a particularly big concern in Jane and Fir Grove, where most residents are renters. That's where Nazra Mohammed has lived her whole life.
Housing is a precarious conversation around the city, but when you focus into lower income communities that are receiving lower wages in a dense area like this, rent control becomes a line between whether I'm going to pay rent, groceries, or gonna have to apply for social housing.
And she says it's not just about addressing rent control, but also addressing gentrification. After years of neglect, PCHC demolished parts of the Fir Grove Grassways community. The community housing units will be replaced, but hundreds of market units will also be built in what's being called a revitalization of the area.
So the question is, how are you going to keep the character of the community while also allowing us to, live here and not being pushed out or priced out?
Come on! The rent control has to come back, and that's a provincial thing, as we know. Once we do that, we also need to license the landlords, and they're trying to fight that because if you license them, now they're accountable.
Yay! Marcia Stone knows how hard it can be to find an affordable rental. She's now an advocate with Acorn, fighting for tenant rights.
What do you think's going to happen if we don't put rent control in place? If it's not made a priority, you're going to have more and more encampments. There's going to be an increase in food banks. it's a domino effect, right?
Here's some of what the four main parties are promising. The PCs say they will protect renters through their More Homes for Everyone plan, though their plan doesn't include programs that directly lower the cost of renting. The Liberals are pledging to bring back rent control and build more rental units. The NDP says it will bring back rent control, including a guarantee that you pay what the last tenant paid. And the Green Party promising rent control and stricter rules around rent evictions and bad faith evictions. The PCs, Liberals and the NDP are also pledging to end the backlog of cases at the Landlord and Tenant Board. For Annie, she wants politicians to understand the realities of renting.
I think the biggest thing would be to listen to the people that are renting when we say that it's not sustainable for us living here right now, and it matters because we vote too.
Kelda Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Quebec will be the first province to launch a monkeypox vaccination program. That comes after health officials confirmed 25 cases of monkeypox in the Montreal area, while dozens more possible cases are now under investigation.
If you give it within 4 days, you have a very good effectiveness in preventing the illness. If you administer it between day 5 and 14, it might not prevent disease, but it might modify the evolution.
The province announced it could start administering shots as soon as tomorrow after it received doses of the smallpox vaccine from the federal government. Vaccines will be given to people who have been in close contact with confirmed cases. Studies on animals show the vaccine can prevent monkeypox within 4 days of exposure or reduce severe symptoms if given from day 5 to 14. Officials say it will not be administered to those who already have an active case of the virus. A Human Rights Watch report says millions of children worldwide had their privacy put at risk when schools shifted to online learning during the pandemic. It says many online education platforms allowed students' personal data to be shared with advertisers. And as Yvette Brend reports, Canadian kids were among those affected.
Diane McSporran's children, like many, did all their pandemic schooling online. It turns out now some educational tools that they used may have been doing homework on them.
Really, the phone is in my kids' pockets, and as soon as they're linked to Wi-Fi, I'm at the mercy of what they've been taught in school.
Frankly, it astounded me.
The report examined 164 educational websites and apps used in 49 countries. It found children were being surveilled at a dizzying scale.
There was actually no way to protect your child against these trackers unless you threw your child's device away in the trash.
It's prompted calls for Canada to update laws to protect children.
It is very important for the governments to set up the clear laws to say what kind of information can be collected and to what extent can be collected and how the information can be used.
But during a pandemic, students couldn't skip out of online class.
Don't overshare. If you're filling out a form, for example, only do the parts that are mandatory and skip the rest.
CBC Kids' educational portal was highlighted in the report as one of the problematic platforms. It allegedly shared some children's data with Facebook. CBC's head of public affairs, Chuck Thompson, said, "While we applaud the work of what the Human Rights Watch is doing to protect children, respectfully, they have incorrectly called us out. Simply stated, we have not, do not, and will not collect or share children's data with any third-party ad trackers. To say as much is as irresponsible as it is egregious." McSporran says it's tough to know where online learning is safe.
Kind of powerless, yeah. Because like I said before, if we want to use the functions that are on our phones and our computers, we have to give certain information away.
Yvette Brend, CBC News, Vancouver.
I'm thinking Colette may have a forecast for the gardeners among us.
I think I do. That's right, Dwight. And you know, if you're trying to just do kind of anything outdoors and you need drier conditions, it's sort of hard to plan with a system like this. So I'm going to do my best to kind of walk you through where those windows of opportunity will be. And I think there'll be a pretty extensive one tomorrow eventually. These are our current temperatures really hanging in there. The wind off the lake makes it a little cooler in Kingston, but we're still holding at 26. And hey, that's just the temperature. Then we factor in the humidity. Our Humidex feels like value at 32. So in those low 30s, here's some of that heavier rain. And we've been seeing this more continuous, pushing across Lake Huron yesterday, today, and Georgian Bay, off and on into southwestern Ontario. A lot of it kind of going around. I know we had some showers last evening, but a lot of it sort of going around the GTA. But just watch what happens through the overnight tonight. We'll see more organized periods of rain with some embedded thunderstorms, so at times some heavier rainfall, and lingering into tomorrow morning. So the morning commute, I'm expecting in many cases, is still going to be wet as well. Then we'll see that parcel move through, likely get into some sunshine, but with a front coming towards us, those things tend to combine to add to the volatility, and we get into more active weather with rain and thunderstorms developing again. I've stopped this at 4 p.m. You can see what's trying to push into the region. A lot of it does pull to the northeast, but still we'll probably get tagged by some of that into the later afternoon and evening hours tomorrow. So after the morning stuff ends and before we get into the action later, that'll be one of your opportunities. And how about the entire weekend? Most of it anyway, not everywhere. We will see further north a little bit of rain coming through, but most of the Golden Horseshoe and southwestern Ontario, we are looking at more comfortable air and drier conditions Saturday and Sunday. Overnight tonight, not necessarily on the cool side with those overnight lows, and just having a look at, we still have what's coming next week, Dwight, which is going to be that significant warm-up.
Look at that, just to see the numbers rising. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Some sad news to share from the world of entertainment. American actor Ray Liotta has died at the age of 67. Several U.S. media outlets are reporting Liotta died overnight in his sleep in the Dominican Republic, where he was filming a new movie. He broke through with the film Something Wild in 1986, but he's best known for his role as a mobster in the crime classic Goodfellas. The award-winning actor made well over 100 films and TV shows during his decades-long career. He was engaged to be married and leaves behind a 23-year-old daughter. The cost of living is rising across our country, and it's not just that prices are going up for shoppers. In some cases, they are paying more for less. Nisha Patel explains the impact of what's known as shrinkflation.
Kathleen Cassidy pays more attention to products and prices than the average shopper.
We're not seeing our money stretch as far as it used to. We have a lot of cleaners, soaps.
She's an extreme couponer. Her storage room is packed with deals she's found, which help her cope with soaring bills. Lately, she's noticed the price of some items are unchanged, but she's getting less.
I used to get 40 of this, now I only get 38. It is kind of difficult for the consumer.
It's known as shrinkflation, when manufacturers make products smaller but charge the same price.
The old size was 32 ounces. The new one, which is over here, is 28. So you lost over 12%. What did they do? They gave the bottle a little bit of a waistline.
Consumer watchdog Edgar Dworsky has found examples like this sports drink sold in the U.S. Other products he's found on American shelves include Sun-Made raisins, Dove body wash, and Cheerios cereal.
Paper products, candy, chips, snacks, cookies, all those things have been downsized multiple times over the years, and I don't think it's going to stop.
The reason? Some manufacturers would rather shrink the package than raise their prices.
Their costs are increasing, therefore the profits are going to decrease if they don't make any modifications.
To counter shrinkflation, shoppers should keep an eye out for changes to the size and shape of packaging and consider switching to cheaper generic brands that don't change as often. And instead of looking at the price of the whole item, focus on the price per milliliter or gram, which gives a more accurate cost.
The best thing we have is looking at the per unit price.
314 plus 1,000 followers.
Cassidy is already sharing her money-saving tips on TikTok.
Through clearance prices, getting physical coupons, using loyalty points.
Helping people cope even as prices rise and packages shrink. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
We head to break. Here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX closed up by 148 points. The Dow rising by 516 points, and the dollar also trading higher at 78.17 cents U.S. We'll be right back. In Ontario's last provincial election, voter turnout was around 58%. With the next election just a week away, one nonprofit is hoping to boost engagement even further. Operation Black Vote Canada has been speaking to residents, particularly within the city's Black community, to spread more information about the election. Metro Morning's host, Ismaila Alpha, tagged along on their last outing to Little Jamaica.
Do you intend to vote in this election?
Yes, I do.
Absolutely. I believe my vote counts. And I believe that if I don't vote, I can't complain.
My vote counts. My vote counts. Everybody in my family votes.
Are you going to be voting?
Looking at these guys, probably not.
Why not?
Because none of their platforms speak to me. So for me personally, there's no incentive to vote for people. I'm okay with my vote not counting.
Are you going to be voting?
Probably not. I don't know who's who.
Yeah, as well. Have you listened to them, the debate or the platforms?
No, not really. Not yet.
There are people who are committed to voting, and there are people who are not voting simply because they don't have the information. So what is important is, one, to get information to all communities, and for leaders to come into different communities to provide them with that information and to answer their questions. So I think, if more of us got out and voted, I think we would see a different type of government. I think, if we did our homework and looked at the platform, we would vote for a government that actually has our best interests in hand, actually has our best interests in terms of making things better for us in education, making us better things for us in healthcare. So I think it's very important for us to go to vote.
What are the issues at the top of your list that'll make the difference as to who you decide to vote for?
Top of the list. I would say, more funding for social services.
I think, particularly on Eglinton West, there have been a number of challenges that need to be addressed.
I want to make sure that I'm not voting because you're a particular party, okay? I want to make sure that what you're doing is going to be good for the province, obviously, but my community needs to feel what you're doing also. And our community, we always at the bottom of the ladder, and that's a challenge that we have.
I'm from Brampton, and in Brampton we only have one hospital, but we obviously need a lot more because it's just too much for the nurses. I come from a family of nurses.
Be here and speak to the people, because what is impactful to me and the changes that are needed from my perspective is going to vary within the individuals in the neighborhood.
When we had our provincial town hall about a month ago, a couple of the issues that came up were education, healthcare, and in particular mental health, transportation, and all the issues that are important to everybody else is important to the Black community. However, we want to know how leaders and parties are going to look at it at an anti-Black systemic lens, because those policies hit us differently when they rolled out.
And so we're here at the Little Jamaica cleanup. What do you hope to achieve as Operation Black Vote Canada at an event like this?
Well, we hope to do a couple of things. One, give them the opportunity to ask us any questions about the voting process, because at times people don't understand the voting process, but also educate them on the different ways that we can vote. There's advanced polling happening right now, so you can go and vote, or on election day. We don't tell you who to vote for, but it is important that we have our votes counted.
But there is this idea out there that people from the Black community don't vote as much as some other communities. Why is that impression out there, do you think?
It's out there because they're not talking to the right people.
Okay.
Right? So negative information always reaches before positive information. So we practice civic engagement.
For all the candidates out there, all of the leaders, what do they need to do to get more votes from the Black community?
Go into the spaces that they are. They are in certain spaces, go into them. Let yourself be known, right? And don't wait for an invitation, show up.
We hardly see our leaders on the ground. We hardly see people who look like us on the ground.
Be more in the community, I need to see your face.
What type of difference can it make to have more people from the Black community out there voting? What type of difference for everyone?
Great. So I think if we make an informed vote, we'll be able to elect a government
that is going to be sensitive to our issues, that's going to be responsive to our issues. So I think, if more of us got out and voted, I think we would see a different type of government. I think, if we did our homework and looked at the platforms, we would vote for a government that actually has our best interests in hand, actually has our best interest in terms of making things better for us in education, making us better things for us in healthcare.
Are you planning on voting this election?
I was not, but I may consider.
No, I wasn't, because I wasn't really vetted on who's who, what, who's running and what they represent.
And what would get you out to vote?
More information. Yeah, more information.
So we've seen that there has been a peak in interest since we've been out there and doing different things. I'm not sure if they actually go to the poll, but they do start thinking about how we can make a difference politically.
A new facility at Ontario Tech University has unveiled what it's calling a rolling road. The 7-meter single-bed piece of equipment simulates actual highway speeds to measure the physical characteristics of a car in real-world conditions.
So we can take scientific approaches 365 days a year and be able to isolate what is in fact improving or not improving. Ideas that you would think would work aren't working.
Developers say the rolling road would make cars more aerodynamic, meaning they would use less gas. The belt can test wind speeds of up to 300 kilometers an hour and temperatures between -40 and +60 degrees Celsius. And we're going to be half of that next week at a +30, Colin, it sounds like.
I know, yes. That's right. Some incredible weather, very summer-like coming our way. I know the humidity feels a little summer-like now. Just taking a look at the radar, we do have some of those rains, those waves I talked about, kind of pushing through Milton, Brampton, headed through Mississauga, and pushing towards downtown and northern parts of the city. So do know we are going to have some wet weather overnight tonight and now coming our way.
Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 6. Have a great night and stay safe out there, everybody.